Now who got game when it comes to this basketball? Facing other opponents that's over 6 feet tall. Can you shoot a three-pointer? Can you do the finger roll? Can you cross over, drop it down the lane, take it to the hole? Can you hoop it up, alley hoop it up? And when the ball is loose, see how fast you can scoop it up. Had your game face on, I hope you're quick on your feet, playing on concrete and taking NBA to the streets.
When it comes to making sports sequels, there's usually kind of a few different approaches a company will take. When it comes to the simulation-styled stuff, you can expect to see a roster update and a few minor tweaks that'll just make the game a little bit fresh and new for fans of the series. That doesn't work so well when you stray away from the simulation side of things, because if you're playing a street basketball game like NBA Street, you don't necessarily care about updated NBA rosters. You just want kind of a good playing game that looks good, feels good. NBA Street Volume 2 is a pretty good example of how sequels to these styles of games should be made. It makes just enough tweaks to feel fresh for the hardcore player, and perhaps most importantly, it doesn't break anything that was cool about the first game. There are two main modes in NBA Street Volume 2. The first one is the Be a Legend mode, and in this mode you create your own player and then take him through a series of street basketball games. You kind of tour around from court to court. You start out in New York, make your way through Philadelphia, Chicago, Seattle, LA, and Oakland. And along the way, you'll be picking up new players for your 3-on-3 basketball team. You'll also be earning stats as you win matches, which you can then use to improve your player by spending those points on improved stats. Or if you just want to make them look a little flashier, you can buy jerseys and new shoes and a lot of other little stuff like that. The main point of the Be a Legend mode is to build your reputation up. You have a reputation meter that grows as you win games, and the more reputation points you earn, the further away from home you can travel. It'll open up pickup games at different courts. It'll open up boss battles against the game's kind of street legend players that you'll take on. These boss characters have usually one special stat that is higher than you can actually make your own stat using the points that you earn. So you can actually get these players after you beat them. You can trade some of your players for some of the players of the teams that you've beaten. So you can kind of assemble a team of these boss characters, which in turn make your whole game that much better. The other main mode is NBA Challenge mode, and this is another mode designed to let you unlock a bunch of stuff. You basically can create your own team for this mode, or pick from one of the NBA teams. You kind of can pick your own NBA players for this mode, and you go up against every other team in the league. And here, basically, it's the same type of game. It's 3-on-3 basketball. It's not just, just because it's NBA players doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to be playing by NBA rules or anything weird like that. But just lets you take up, pick up games against the league's best, and along the way you'll unlock star players, new jerseys for your created players. You can unlock Nelly and the St. Lunatics, or Just Blaze, both of whom are on the soundtrack, and a lot of other cool little things like that. On the surface, the gameplay in NBA Street Volume 2 hasn't really changed a whole lot from the first game. It's still the same basic 3-on-3 basketball. You still have a whole lot of tricky dunks at your disposal, and a ton of ground moves that you can use to break down the defense and knock players over so you can drive to the basket. Blocking is just as easy to do as it was in the previous game, and just as much fun to kind of swat balls out of the air and just really stuff people really bad when they make bad shots. Most of the additions in the game come in the form of things that actually kind of balance the game a little bit better between offense and defense. You'll find trick counters that you can use to counter those tricky ground moves to reach in and steal balls out of those moves. You can throw passes that bounce off the backboard and back to another player or back to yourself. There's just a handful of cool little tricks. The game breaker system's also been redesigned for Street 2. Basically, as you perform these tricks and combo them together, you'll earn trick points, and you'll also fill up your game breaker meter. Once this fills up, you can unleash your game breaker shot, which basically has the effect of scoring points for you while actually taking points away from the opposite team. Here, the level 1 game breaker, your standard game breaker, is a little bit easier to block. The computer especially is much better at blocking those game breakers, even on the easiest difficulty setting. So what you can do is you can actually store that game breaker and then build up the meter again for a level 2 game breaker, which actually takes even more points away from the opposing team when you land it, and it also has the additional benefit of being unblockable. Graphically, NBA Street Volume 2 is a good-looking game. There's some little issues here and there that don't look so great. The courts look really fantastic. You know, the backdrops look good, but the people standing in the background on the courts they move at like 15 frames a second or something. They just have these really choppy animations that really seem out of place with the rest of the fast-paced action. The player models themselves look okay. There's some weird exaggerations made with some of the characters, and the game kind of goes for this kind of over-the-top cartoony style, but in some cases it just looks a little weird and seems kind of out of place, especially when you're pairing up, the NBA stars with some of the street legends or some of these other players that just don't seem to mesh very well at all. Probably the single greatest problem with the game graphically is the animation. Now, that's a very specific type of animation because, by and large, the animation in the game is actually really good. The animation on the dunks, the animation on the shooting, all really fluid and look really nice. It's just when you blend those motions together, the game's really lacking in the transition department. So if you're moving from, some kind of tricky dribble move to, putting up a shot or trying to dunk, you'll see players kind of jump from one position to the next, and that looks really unnatural and actually looks kind of sloppy. Of course, it keeps the gameplay moving pretty quickly, so you can't fault it too much, but it is really noticeable and does kind of stick out and keeps the game from looking as great as it could have looked. The sound of the game is also pretty good. The sounds of basketball are all pretty good, and the courts all have their own style of ambient sound. You'll hear cell phones ringing, kind of crowds cheering in some of the more populated courts. You'll hear the players actually kind of bantering back and forth, telling each other, look out on D, setting picks and stuff like that. And that's kind of a cool thing. It actually makes the games feel a little more alive than they would otherwise. The soundtrack is handled in typical EA tracks fashion, meaning a stupid little box gets in the way every time the song changes, telling you who the artist is and what the name of the song is. That's really dumb. I just want to go on record as saying that little thing is probably the stupidest thing in the world because it actually pops up right on the screen in the way of the gameplay. I understand it's important, the EA spent all this money to license all these songs. They're going to have to tell you who performed them, but no, that's over the line. But anyway, the music in the game is pretty good. It's all instrumental rap stuff while you're in the game, which is a positive and a negative. On one hand, the style of the music fits the action very well, but on the other hand, it's all instrumental stuff. And speaking as a rap fan myself, I can say that instrumental rap tracks that are built normally to have lyrics on them are really boring to listen to. So you're basically getting 3.5 minutes of the same loop. Maybe it changes up for the chorus, maybe it doesn't, and you're kind of listening to this kind of same loop over and over again. And then it changes songs, and you listen to that loop for a while. I think they probably would have been better off if they had gotten tracks that were built to be instrumentals instead of just taking popular songs and removing the lyrics from them. That probably would have been a little more dynamic and a little easier to listen to for longer periods of time. The commentary in the game is handled by Bobbito Garcia, and he's a New York DJ guy. And he replaces the guy from the first NBA Street that was just really kind of trying too hard and really came across as really fake and hokey. Bobbito actually does a really great job in the game, and some people are really going to hate it because he's kind of obnoxious and yells a lot, but he's yelling completely ludicrous stuff about food. Sometimes he'll just shout about ice cream and lasagna and now that's trying to eat a burrito without a fork, and it's completely ludicrous, and it's actually pretty funny at the same time. He says a lot of different stuff, and it definitely kind of keeps the action moving. NBA Street Volume 2 is available on all 3 major console platforms, and for the most part the game is identical across platforms. The GameCube version doesn't have as much video as the other 2 versions, and the PS2 version actually controls the best out of the 3. Like the previous Street and like and some of the SSX games, NBA Street is built around using 4 buttons for your dunk selection and your trick selection. It's basically, on the PS2, it's mapped to the 4 shoulder buttons. And with the GameCube, you're left with 3 shoulder buttons, and on the Xbox, you're left with 2. So you're kind of having to do some different stuff there to get all those different dunks to come out. And it doesn't work quite as well as it does on the PlayStation 2. but the game is just as good on any system. You really can't go wrong with any platform for NBA Street 2. In the end, NBA Street Volume 2 plays a great game of basketball. Hardcore fans of the series are going to notice that a lot of the game is pretty much the same, but they'll also be the ones that will be most likely to appreciate the small improvements that have been made. Casual fans might not really get quite as much out of the game because they'll notice that it's pretty much identical to the first game. But if you haven't played NBA Street before, this is a great place to start. It's a great game of arcade style basketball, and anyone looking for that sort of game won't be disappointed at all.